What is the role of government in education? We will be looking very closely at that question with a special guest coming up on The Nature of Politics. Everyone, welcome back to The Nature of Politics. Today, I am here with David Schmidt, our special guest. He spent 16 years as a teacher, 5 years as an assistant principal, and 19 years as a principal, 20 years as an educational facilitator. And he's also writing a book titled Humane Leaders for Humane Schools. Welcome, David. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great. You ready to talk about some education?
I'm going to give it a shot.
So kind of first, just recently on June 30th, Trump said that he would cut roughly $5 billion or withhold federal funding from K to 12 grants covering after-school programs, teacher training, migrant education, and English learner support. So what are your thoughts on this? Does Trump have the authority to, cut all this funding, even though Congress did appropriate this funding for those programs? Do you think Trump has the right to do that? And how is this going to impact those after-school programs that are definitely aimed at helping migrant children and people that are non-English speakers?
It seems hard to assume that one person can make a judgment about how we serve the needs of all students. And unfortunately, money plays a factor in how we do things in schools. And to take away specific funding and for specific programs, it makes it tough for all kids because you really truly value every kid matters in our school. And how do we work hard to meet the needs for those kids in every school? And that is a challenge. And unfortunately, money plays a part of that, whether we want to accept that or not.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And, with that, Trump has also tried to dismantle the entire Department of Education, even though this was shot down by a lower court judge. They did also in May propose a 15% cut to the Department of Education budget. So that kind of gets me down to my first question. What is the role of the federal government in education? Is Trump right in trying to, shift it more towards states controlling their own education? Or do you think there should be more federalized control of education within our country?
I guess the biggest factor for me is how do we value education in our country? Is it truly valued? Like in other countries, like, for example, Finland. The teachers in Finland are so highly regarded, and they have to have master's degrees and all things. Education in our country, in my opinion, is so important. And the way we spend our money, the way we talk about education, the way we value it, makes a big difference on what happens in our schools in every state. And by the Department of Education being dismantled, I wonder about what's going to happen to IDA and all those special programs that they monitor and the civil rights cases that they monitor. I wonder what's going to happen to those. And the value of the Department of Education says to the country, education matters. And it has value in what we do. And by just moving it away, say, maybe education isn't really that big a deal. But when you have an education department or Department of Education where money is allocated and there's a commitment to all students, to all kids, to all parents about the value of education, it does have a true meaning about the Department of Education, in my opinion.
All right, and kind of going into the Supreme Court's 2025 term, the Supreme Court ruled that parents need to be notified if, a school is going to give topics or lessons about gender identity, sexuality, or any of those kind of lessons. And, the parent also has the opportunity to say, hey, I don't want my kid to participate in these lessons. Do you think that's a fair choice for a parent to make?
I think the thing that gets confusing for people is that education or teachers or those kind are promoting one type of lifestyle by doing these kind of things. And I don't know any teacher that I've ever worked with that's promoting a specific lifestyle around. And what it ends up doing is we begin to demonize these students about saying that we should judge them based on who they are, what they value, what they believe, and so on. And so I think it's okay for parents to be notified if we're going to talk about topics, but not in a way that demonizes these kids or these families.
Yeah, and kind of going into some of the biggest questions that I have here. Do you feel like there is enough flexibility for teachers to take that curriculum and make it their own, and teach the kids how they can best learn, or do you feel like there is a little bit too much regulation there?
I don't have anything against state standards and curriculum, but there's no magic bullet in education. Just because you now have standards for every kid to achieve, maybe that works well, and it creates some consistency between schools, and I think that is valid. And it creates equity between schools, and say that we have high standards for all kids, and no matter what school that you go to. But the real issue is not having standards, it is helping kids achieve standards. And that's where it becomes harder. Anybody can create curriculum standards. The question is, how do we help them accomplish these standards so there is equity within all our schools and all kids have this chance and are promoted to say that these things are important things to learn? How do we design a school? How do we create the culture in a school that we believe in every kid can achieve these standards? And what does our school have to look like to help all kids achieve these standards at a high level?
Yeah, and like going into standards as well, saying that every kid should achieve the same standards, oftentimes that reverts back to math, reading, writing. What if someone is really good at math, not really good at reading, and maybe they want to be a mathematician one day? How can we customize it to each student? So not saying that every student should achieve the same standards, even though they might have different strengths and different dreams and goals.
I think it's important that you personalize your school to value the worth of each kid and their interests, and the school give kids opportunities to work in areas that they have expertise, interest, knowledge about, and love for, passions for. I think it's really important. I mean, most high schools I worked in, they care deeply about the arts and music and those kind of things. And I think it's important that kids that have those interests have an opportunity to work in those areas. I don't think you want to eliminate things from people. Like, I know math is hard for a lot of kids. And I don't know how many times kids have come to me and said, why do I have to take algebra? And, sometimes that's a hard question. But the real thing for me was, how does it help you become a better thinker intellectually?
Yeah. And, kind of going into standardized testing as well, that's a big thing. It's been around for decades and decades and decades. And do you think it impacts and hurts students and teachers? Because teachers are, evaluated based on their test scores of their class.
I think to judge teachers on just test scores is wrong. I think there's so many factors other than just test scores when you're doing an evaluation or observations of teachers. There's other factors. It can be one indicator, though, to say your students are not achieving in this certain area. What are some things you can work on to help kids improve in this particular area? Maybe it has a lot more to do with the cultural differences of these tests. Are these tests fair? Are the conditions in your classroom fair? Are the things in your school, in your community, are those helping impact what happens on test scores? So I believe test scores are a part of it, but not the only indicator of what a successful school is doing and is all about.
Yeah, and then looking at the entire country as a whole, in 2024, only 31% of fourth graders and 30% of eighth graders scored proficient in reading, and 39% of fourth graders versus 28% of eighth graders in math. Hardly a full picture of overall teaching impact. Eighth grade math scores have declined in all states but Tennessee since 2019. So, standardized test scores have been falling and falling. We are falling in the ranks within the education, kind of rankings among all the other countries in the world. So is that proof of a failing educational system, or is that, proof of not having good enough teachers or not respecting enough teachers, or is, the curriculum and the standardized testing?
Again, I think it's one indicator. I think the great thing about American education, it's about all kids, not some kids, not a lot of kids. It's about all kids. And how do we prepare all kids? It doesn't matter where you come from, your educational background. We accept each and every child, and we welcome each and every child. And it goes back again, how do we create schools that can really impact the learning of each and every child in our school? That's our goal. That's our thing. And standardized testing and different types of testing are just, again, one indicator. What are other indicators that we could promote about kids? The number of kids that go to college and the number of kids from all over the country that come to our country to go to colleges because they're such highly rated. Kids do great in college, as far as I'm concerned, the ones that I know. And so we are preparing kids not just to be intellectually good at taking tests, we're intellectually preparing them to be good adults and good people and to be able to answer and solve problems and be competent in a very pluralistic and contentious society. That's what we're preparing kids for, not just how well to do on a standardized test, although, again, it's just one part of it. How do we demonstrate our success in many, many other ways is how I think about schools.
How can we make schools more modernized?
Well, I guess the emphasis, again, is on learning. If that's our goal, is about learning, and we have to learn how to use technology as a tool to help promote learning in school. I see a lot of times where I think technology becomes like the outcome. Well, I don't think technology is the outcome. I think technology is a tool to increase learning by students. And so it's learning how to take all the current technology and you figure out, how do I use this in a pedagogy that's going to promote learning. And kids are so great at using technology a lot right now. They don't really have to be taught, I don't think, how to use technology very well. They have to learn how to use it to help to promote their own learning and how they continue to move forward as a person that cares about their own learning. And so I agree some of it, that sometimes classrooms look the same a lot, but I'm going to tell you, the teacher standing up in front of the classroom, lecturing all period, I think those days are coming to an end. When the real learning takes place, when kids are doing the work, when kids are reading and writing and talking together and learning together and asking each other questions and promoting their learning, and you create this community and says in this classroom, we're all concerned about what we learn together, and I'm going to help you as another member of this classroom learn at the same time I'm learning. We're going to work together. Take special teachers to do that, but I've seen that happen in classrooms where kids begin to work and they become more responsible for their own learning. And it's not just up to the teacher to kind of regurgitate and give them information. It's for them to make sense of it for themselves.
All right, so what do you think about teacher tenure? Do you think it should still be implemented? Because some people say that it is, good to keep that protection for teachers, for their job security, and show that they are going to be successful in future years to come. Or do you feel like on the other side, people say it's to keep dysfunctional teachers, that maybe they get in tenure and they stop caring about teaching or their job, and then they're not as functional, but then you can't fire them. So how functional do you think teacher tenure is? Do you think it should be changed in any way?
I think there's pros and cons to teacher tenure. The advantage, I think, of teacher tenure is that the first 3 years, it's kind of a time for a teacher to prove themselves and to learn their trade and their practice. And then as a principal or as a district, you have to decide, is this person going to continue to learn and grow and care deeply about the kids that they have to work with? And as a principal or a district, you have to decide, is that person worthy of moving on to a tenure track? And I don't think it's true you can't fire them for any reason. It just becomes harder to let them go. And then the other part is sometimes I think we give up on teachers because they're not performing at a level that you hope to. But I guess I believe that if you work with teachers and you believe in teachers, you can change how they think about their work, even after they are on tenure, and you can make a difference in their practice, especially if you create a community around them that cares deeply about their school and their kids. And it's sad to be a teacher in a school that doesn't perform well. And if a teacher is not performing well or not, and it's hard for them, they don't like the job either.
So how do you view school choice and the debate over this, including charter schools and vouchers, vouchers is basically giving money to these kids and parents to pay to go to private school? And do you believe it benefits or harms public education? About 35% of K through 12 parents have considered switching their child's school, which like to a private institution or to another school altogether, rising to about 72% among private school parents, pointing to real demand for alternatives.
I think it is okay for parents to have a choice in where their kids go to school. And it doesn't have to be just private schools or other schools. Maybe it's schools within your district, and they would do better at a different school like that with choice. I also think it's hard for kids to change schools. And I know that I read some research one time is one of the most stressful things on kids. It was like number 3 on thing is changing schools. So if you're going to change schools of a student, you have to be really thoughtful about it and say, this is why I'm going to change schools. I also think that there's this idea that charter schools and voucher schools are going to be better than schools. They're not automatically better schools just because they have a voucher or because they have charter. All schools struggle with certain issues, and you have to decide if this is truly the best place to come. I do know that charter schools and voucher schools will impact the funding for public schools. I think 95% of the kids in this country go to public schools. And so more kids leaving public schools will impact the money that they have now to give to the public schools, because more money is now going to maybe the charter schools and the vouchers is going to take money away from public schools. And so that's going to impact the funding for the school. And that's what people, I think, really worry about, is how is that funding going to impact our school if we give millions of dollars away in vouchers to other schools, lower our enrollment because we get paid per pupil funding in most cases. How is that going to impact the public school when the vast majority of kids still go to school?
So do you ever see books or ideas banned in your time? And what impact do you think censorship, whether it's in curriculum, not teaching about sexual identity and things like that, or race theory, how does this impact critical thinking or openness in education?
I don't like book bans. I think at least the people I've always worked with and the librarians and those kind of people are very thoughtful about the type of books they have in their library. And they do a good job of saying, maybe this book isn't quite appropriate for this level, so maybe I'll move it to a different level. Or maybe this type of book isn't appropriate for our school. I trust librarians and principals and things to make those decisions because they don't want to do anything at harmful. Having books where kids learn about other kids that maybe are different than them, I don't think is a bad thing. And I think it's something to realize that we are a pluralistic society, and it's become very contentious. How do we create better understanding about people that are different races, different genders, all those kind of things, people from different beliefs? It's important to learn about those kind of things. Not to say that I want to be like that, but to say I want to learn more what it means to be a person that came from El Salvador.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today, David Schmidt. And if you had to give our audience 3 big questions to think about on this topic that we've been covering, just kind of 3 questions that they can, debate with family, friends, online about, and ask questions to themselves and what they believe in, what are those kind of big 3 questions you think they should be talking about?
I guess the question, I think it's one that we've always asked, is what is the purpose of education? Is it just about learning reading, writing, and math, or is it much more than that? What is truly the purpose of education in our country? Another one to be is how do we value education if we believe if we're clear on our purpose? And the other thing is, how do we continue to support education and something that is so vital in becoming a democratic country that we lead the world in? And so how do we continue to support it and do the best thing we can for education, and how do we learn more about how we can do that?
Well, thank you very much for joining me today, David. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll be back next week. I hope you enjoyed our episode, and thank you very much.